undue pressures from governments to impose changes in the legislation that undermines the need for self-regulation by exceeding the limitations of the Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights, as well as other important problems in terms of ethics, integrity, and independence of the media. The ongoing public health crisis must not be used to silence journalists or hinder their work. This is one of the latest European Union statements with regard to the safety of journalists, freedom of expression and freedom of media. As for any other free profession, but especially for journalists and their crucial mission to inform public with transparency and truthfully, aspects such as integrity, professionalism, and ethics are the key elements for which there is a need for more support through an impactful self-regulatory process that leaves no room to the governments or parliaments to intervene or to have harmful premises for violating freedom of expression and media freedom. For all these challenges, as well as for many others, better than anyone else, through this conference will speak respected journalists and media activists from Western Balkan, who due to their profession are positioned at the first front of receiving and transmitting news to the public, who sometimes are testimonies of violations made towards themselves or their colleagues, as well as media experts, international experts, and judges from the Strasbourg Court. What is very crucial for us as organizer and supporter of this event is to keep alive the regional debate about the challenges of journalists and freedom of media in Western Balkan by encouraging solutions from professional journalists and media experts with integrity. That's the reason then that the debate will not have an end as usually it has with the finalization of a conference, but we will follow up it by supporting innovative initiatives from young, courageous, and dedicated journalists in the Western Balkan. Albanian Helsinki Committee, with its core mission to respect and promote human rights, is also interested to follow the debates and solutions of this conference exactly at the stage when we are designing the first national barometer that will measure media independence in Albania, as well as in the situation when we are following closely the need for establishing a trade union for journalists and media employees in Albania in order to better protect their human rights and freedoms. In conclusion, I would like to express on behalf of our organization our gratitude and thanks to those who the realization of this design and implementations, the Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands in Albania and the counterpart region, sister organizations in Serbia and Northern Macedonia, BIRN Kosovo, Media Center in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Media Center in Montenegro. All the lecturers and the contributors who accepted our invitation to be part of this agenda, representatives of judiciary and regulatory bodies in the Western Balkan, and especially those colleagues with whom we had the pleasure to work together and learn from each other for more than 4 months without being discouraged by any of the difficulties encountered during the organization of this conference. Elga Mitre, Sin van den Hoof, Erwin, Ola, and Lutfi Dervishi. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Rida. As you mentioned, we are lucky to have the support of the Netherlands Embassy here in Albania and across the region. And I take this opportunity as we have Madam Ambassador present here and asking what's the aim and what are your expectations about this regional conference?
Well, thank you very much. And I'm really happy to be here tonight with all of you in this room. It's really great to have live events every now and then, and with all of you on the screen here in Albania, across the region and in the Netherlands. And I'm very pleased to be here because the freedom of expression and the freedom of media are topics that are very close to my heart, figuratively speaking, but also literally speaking, given the fact that I'm married to a journalist and I see the daily deliberations on what to write and how to write it. The past year has been a very challenging one. The COVID-19 pandemic has put all of us under a lot of pressure. We had to find ways to protect our bodies and our minds and to protect each other. We could feel the pressure, not only individually, but also collectively. Schools were shut down, co-workers had to start meeting via screens, and hospitals and care workers were facing an enormous capacity challenge. And what about the media? It was already briefly addressed by Ms. Kendai. The media had the crucial task of informing the public about what was actually happening. Not an easy task. One of the difficulties in covering the pandemic was the fact that science was discovering in real time what was going on. And we all know that science is not a straightforward process. It's a matter of trial and error. And that was also very much reflected in the reporting about the virus that transmitted the ambiguous answers to complex questions. Were children spreading the virus or not? Were only elderly people at risk or all of us? Wearing masks, is it helpful or is it not necessary? Another challenge for the media was to strike a balance between informing about the harsh truth of the situation and offering a ray of hope. We will never forget the images of crowded intensive care units in hospitals and even in corridors, but we will also remember the first messages of hope after the successful testing of new vaccines. This experience shows us to what extent we count on the media to inform us, to tell us the truth, even if it's a complex truth, and to show us the facts, even when those facts are contradicting themselves. For the media to be able to tell us the truth and give us the facts, they need to be free. They need to work without fear and favor. Where there's freedom for clashing perspectives, the truth emerges. And that's why a free press is one of the essential foundations for a functioning democracy and a free society. It enables people to make informed choices in democratic elections, like the one we had yesterday in the Netherlands, based on the facts. Freedom of media goes hand in hand with media self-regulation. And the self-regulation refers to ethical guidelines of the professional journalistic community. When media regulate themselves, state interventions become redundant. The media becomes directly accountable to the public and is capable of correcting its own mistakes. Effective self-regulation makes the media independent. However, the search for effective self-regulation is an ongoing process and will keep evolving as media keeps transforming and adapting to societal needs and technological innovations. Of course, the mere existence of a system of self-regulation in itself does not guarantee high quality and independent journalism. It should always be critically observed by the public and enhanced whenever needed, since we also see that the code of ethics is often disregarded, undermining the public trust in the media outlets. In several of the Western Balkan countries, initiatives for self-regulation have been taken over the last years. In Albania, a group of media outlets agreed approximately a year ago to adhere themselves to a self-regulating exercise, the Ethical Media Alliance. Although the alliance is still in an emerging stage, this initiative shows responsibility, maturity, and professionalism. And it's an excellent opportunity to increase the level of trust and encourage citizens to hear and read the news critically. The Netherlands has a long tradition of media freedom and continues to protect and promote freedom of expression online and offline, at home and around the world. And that's why we organize these regional media conferences. The freedom of media and of press is an absolute priority in our foreign policy. We worry about the shrinking space for the freedom of expression and the increasing number of threats against journalists. It is clear that journalists need our protection wherever they are. And fortunately, many agree with us, as the Hague commitment to increase the safety of journalists shows. During the World Press Freedom Conference, that was held last year in The Hague in December, 53 countries, including many from this region, signed the commitment to protect journalists. Looking at the countries from the region that are represented at this conference, all are colored orange in the 2020 World Press Freedom Index. On this map, orange means problematic. So we know that there's still a lot of work to be done. The Netherlands will walk this road with you and support progress made in the media landscape in an inclusive approach, targeting all the relevant stakeholders, the government, journalists and media, the judiciary, the legal sector, civil society, academia, and youth. We're a committed partner when it comes to raising awareness and strengthening the freedom of expression, media self-regulation, and independence. And I hope, and that's finally the answer to your question, I took a bit longer to answer. I really hope that this conference and the many contributions of experts and of your colleagues from here, from the region, will inspire. I also hope that sharing ideas and critical thoughts, examples and good practices will lead us further on the road to media with self-regulation, with ethics and independence. I would also like to express my thanks to Elga and Sien, my two colleagues who have been working very hard on this conference. And of course, I would really like to thank the Albanian Helsinki Committee for all the work done. I know it wasn't an easy process, but I think it's great that in the end, we managed to all be here in this room and online and have so many interesting experts. And of course, Mr. Rishi leading us through the evening tonight. So thank you very much.
Gusi Korthel Artes, Madam Ambassador, thank you very much for your welcoming remarks. You mentioned you're coming from a country with a long tradition and helping countries with a really lack of tradition in the media, in the freedom of the media. And I also was struck by emphasis of one freedom on one hand and self-regulation on the other. And by enforcing our self-regulation, it means practically more freedom for us. But that would be also the subject of discussion tomorrow, the whole day. And we are so lucky to have here not only good and respected journalists, but also good experts and also officials from the regulatory bodies. I'd like to start with a very independent-minded journalist that we had for decades now, and lucky to have him, Adi Krasta. And hearing his thoughts in Albania is a weekly privilege for the Albanian audience, but also for our audience, I think it's a privilege to hear your thoughts in English this time.
Thanks, Ludi. I want to thank Yoni Dagashi, English student, excellent English student. My English is really suffering at times. Okay, hi everybody. When Facebook and Twitter made the decision to close President Donald Trump's account, many of us still found it difficult to decide if the decision was indeed the right one. Yes, the president exaggerated with provocative, divisive, racist, and misogynistic language. At the same time, he has every right to express his opinion in a space regulated by law. In 2018, the Albanian government announced a set of amendments to the law 97. I didn't know it was this number. I didn't know it was this law. And the other one, 9918, as known to everybody as the Anti-Defamation Package. The main aim of the draft package was to regulate the activity of the electronic publication service providers, the online media outlets. At the time, the proposed amendments provoked a strong reaction from the General Rapporteur on Media Freedom in the European Commission, Stefan Schenak, on the grounds that they said amendments violated media freedom and freedom of expression, and thereby negatively impacted government accountability in a country with already weak and fragile democratic standards. Alarm bells were also rung by the 18 journalists associations in the country. In exchange between the rapporteurs, the proponents of the amendments within the parliament argued that the online media have the capacity to disseminate rapidly and anonymously false and defamatory information. And I remember talking to students about Joseph Pulitzer's reforms to journalism and newspapers already 120 years ago to understand, realize the editorial decision to separate the good from the bad, reporting in the interest of the general public, speaking truth to power, taking care to avoid or minimize distorted or fake news. These have been constant challenges since the very beginning of the journalism and the media. The government, the Albanian government, maintained the view that considering the broad outreach of online media of today, its influence, it was necessary to update the legal framework regulating those media. Other reasons for adopting the amendments included the fight against, look at this, child pornography, the need to protect children in general, as an illustration of dangers associated with the absence of regulations concerning online publications. The authorities cited the examples for false rumors that have caused panic among the citizens after the recent earthquake in the country. They stressed that the currently existing mechanisms are insufficient to quickly identify the authors of such false information and prevent their dissemination. This is a clearly disingenuous and calculated stance. We knew this much and we know better. The Albanian Prime Minister's approach is hypocritical at best. We are talking here about a PM who has his own online television channel, and not only. The Albanian government controls virtually all the national television stations in the country, thanks to lucrative economic and financial deals benefiting media owners. For instance, the government has awarded national broadcasters huge sums of money under the guise of supporting the digitalization process. The allocation of digital frequencies, a process that can only be described as non-transparent, conspiratorial, completely clientelistic, effectively creating an unbreakable monopoly of television channels that support the government in what should have been instead a battle for the truth. But what should the online media landscape look like without government intervention to regulate it? The sensationalism of the headlines cannot be regulated by law. It is a matter of style and principled journalistic attitude. Subliminal messages, underlining, cannot be regulated by law either. It is an inevitable consequence of modern public relations. Bullying itself, racism, misogyny themselves are becoming more and more sophisticated. Not so much in these days of the electoral battle anyway. Only when the result is an attack on the Capitol Hill, for example, does the alarm against the instigators who speak very easily, not thinking very much, rise. Everything that happens next resembles, in fact, a hopeless reaction after the fact. The Albanian government was never concerned whatsoever about the drastic application of the doctrine of, excuse me, cancel culture, for example. The Prime Minister of Albania and the Mayor of Tirana pressured media owners to fire 2 journalists known to the public before the termination of their respective contracts. The government never spoke one word of this cowardly act. It could not, because it instigated it. The Code of Labor ought to be amended so to protect employees from the unilateral termination of the employment contract by their employer. But the government is afraid of what is happening in online media, which it cannot evidently control, which is not true, by the way. It controls it in a very, very high scale. I'm now reminded of the etymology of the word control, which comes from Latin, contra rotulare, to turn in the opposite direction. On at least 3 occasions, the Albanian Prime Minister has performed an unprecedented act of contra rotulare, making exceptional statements that can only be compared to court verdict, when he declared that the owner of Agon Channel was an exponent of the mafia and the channel should be closed down, which happened. When he declared that the former governor of the Bank of Albania was a thief and he had to go to jail. And we declared that a renowned cardiologist was guilty of tax evasion. In the first case, court sided with the Italian exponent of the mafia, and the conclusion of the trial at Exceed in Washington, Albanian taxpayers must pay a compensation for the prime ministerial talk of 110 million euros. Which law? How can we regulate or self-regulate the law that could punish the Albanian prime minister for abuse of office and use of the media as a firing squad to eliminate political opponents and to put psychological pressure on the electorate and the media itself? I'll leave it rhetorical. It has always been the case, and it has similarly always been known that there are journalists who do the bidding of those in power. Amongst these, there are, as you well know, capable, talented journalists, as well as incompetent and miserable ones. There is no forbidding them from offering and performing their services. They cannot be regulated or self-regulated. Working with reliable sources is a personal endeavor and part of one's constitution. The verification of facts is the very essence of journalism. This has not changed since the day one. Globalization will not change it. Fake news and post-truth can damage it, but they cannot take it out of the equation. The confrontation between the media and the journalists today, it's about quality and being convincible. The confrontation with the power is in relation to freedom. And for me, the law is only the truth. This is what I can say.
Thank you, Adi. You mentioned several times that this cannot be regulated by law. This cannot be regulated by law, which somehow means that should be self-regulated. And I'd like to hear, as a matter of fact, the experience from Netherlands. In Albania, we never had a case that we had ombudsman in our own institutions. I don't know, as a reporter which started reporting last century, mentioned me at that time that we need an ombudsman in the office. I would take it not as a good thing. But the question is, how comes that the countries with well-established democracy and long tradition in the freedom of the media, they need it and they have it? And I'd like to hear Short de Jong, ombudsman of Nrc Media in Netherlands, about your work, basically, and in what way are you helping journalists or are you helping the company in order to avoid going to the courts for slander or anything?
Okay, thank you for having me. I hope both of those are true, actually. And as far as self-regulation goes, you know, here in Holland, self-regulation is almost a disease. It's a thing that's it's endemic to the Dutch media. There is no national media code. There is a journalism council, but it does not have any sanctions. It can only advise or monitor media to publish a correction or to apologize, but it does not have any legal standing. And as far as the company I'm working for goes, which is Nrc Media, and maybe I'll give you a short introduction. It's a national liberal newspaper. Some readers think it's a left-leaning newspaper. It's a national newspaper that has gradually evolved into a multimedia platform, which is now mostly digital. 90% of our readership who are new to the newspaper reaches via digital media or social media. So, and that poses a lot of new challenges also concerning self-regulation. Now, as far as the Ombudsman goes, it's a new position at the newspaper. It was instituted in 2010 by the editor-in-chief, because there had been a political row in which my newspaper was accused of being partisan or being unfair. And so the position of a public editor came into view as a remedy, and also as a means to give readers more transparency, both as to the workings of the newspaper. How does it work? How is it being made? What are the decisions that journalists make every day? And also to increase accountability. So not only explain why journalists do what they do and how they do it, but also be transparent and accountable about if things go wrong. Why do they go wrong? What if journalistic decisions are false or are unfair? So my position as an ombudsman comprises all these things. My work consists of a number of things, mainly evaluating news coverage, which is everything from the print editions to online, and also a growing market of podcasts that the newspaper has been initiating. So evaluating news coverage, dealing with complaints, and those can be complaints by readers, but also by people who figure in the coverage of the newspaper. So if you are being interviewed and afterwards you complain that you are not being quoted correctly, you can go to the Ombudsman. A third is giving public presentations like this one. A fourth is writing a weekly column in which I expose the main problem that I've been dealing with the last couple of days. And that's only a tip of the iceberg, of course, because I tend to write a column about topics that I feel are relevant or interesting to most readers. So not just everything comes along, but big problems that may say something about journalism in general. Then I also make house calls, which is a very old-fashioned way, almost like a veterinarian, I think, to visit readers and listen to their complaints, listen to what they're saying about the newspaper, and also notice how they deal with the newspaper. Because if you're visiting readers, you find all kinds of newspaper clippings, notes with a red pencil, annotations, and that gives you a very good feel about how people are living with the newspaper. And lastly, I've also been cooperating with the editor-in-chief in writing an Nrc ethical code, which is a code about how journalists from my newspaper are expected to behave, are expected to report, and how they are to be judged. So, of course, it's not an empirical code. It's not a description of the way they work. It's normative. It's giving guidelines as to how they should operate. Now, as far as the topic of this conference goes, self-regulation and independence, there are a few trends in Holland which you may recognize. There's a lot of polarization in society these days, left-wing, right-wing, racist, anti-racist, climate change, anti-climate change. There's a lot of polarization, which means that for media like mine, there's a lot of pressure from three kinds of pressure groups. First of all, of course, there's pressure from individuals. Those are people who feel that they have been unfairly treated by the media and who ask, for instance, if mention of them in articles can be removed. So that's the big problem of unpublishing, which you may be familiar with, the question that something be taken down from the internet. It can be taken down completely, or it can be, as the term is, be delisted, which means that you can't find it through Google anymore. That's a big problem that we're dealing with right now. Second one is pressure from from action groups, collective pressure. Excuse me?
Go on, please. There was some slight interruption.
Okay, I hope it's not censorship or something. Okay, collective pressure from action groups, which can be political, which can be ideological, which can be religious. That's very prominent in Holland nowadays. You have the racism, anti-racism debate, the climate debate. Of course, also the COVID debate. There are a lot of pressure groups who tend to regard COVID as a hoax. They also try to issue pressure on media. And lastly, of course, there's also pressure from owners. Nrc Media is privately owned, and that means that owners want revenue. So there you have the pressure to get as many clicks as possible for articles. And that's a constant struggle to mediate between journalistic objectivity and the lure of clickbait, as you might call it. Now, lastly, some points about independence, which is, I think, is the main topic of this conference. You always have to ask yourself, independence from what or from whom? And I gather that in Albania, the situation might be very different from the one in Holland, but still in Holland, journalists tend to feel they're independent if they can write what they want to write. But of course, that's just a very superficial way of thinking about independence, because media in Holland, my newspaper, is privately owned, as I said. So, okay, you're free to publish what you want, but still you're dependent on your owners for investment, for targets, for expanding the reach of the journalism you're trying to make. The second form of independence is, of course, independent from government, which might be in Albania very different from Holland. In Holland, there's hardly any government interference with media. There's no, as I said, no national media code. There's also a slightly, you might think that fear of government dependence is going too far in Holland, because there's almost an aversion to government subsidy of media, while at the same time local media in Holland are very much threatened. So you can make a case for government subsidy of local media. Then there's another, lastly, another point of independence, which might strike you as very strange, but is independence from readers. Readership, as I noted, is growing very much assertive and making demands on journalism. And it's a new challenge for media to find a way of dealing with readership pressure. Because if you only cater to wishes of readers, which want the newspaper to go this way or that way, then still, where do you leave your independence? So to close my introduction, I still think the best remedy for all those challenges to independence, of which I'm forgetting one very prominent one, which is the threat to independence from the big corporate media businesses like Google and Facebook, who do not regard themselves as media organizations, but of course they are. They are very much in control of distributing, of hierarchizing news outlets. So What is their role? And to go back to unpublishing, sometimes at my newspaper, we unpublish a story or we anonymize a story, but Google does it all the time. But what are the criteria of Google? How do they make those decisions? We don't know. Okay, so to get back to the remedy for all this, and I don't think it's a remedy for Google, but for all the other ones, it might be. It still is to have a very solid statute for your newspaper or for your news outlet, which guarantees editorial independence from all the above. That still is the case in Holland, might not be the case everywhere, but it's very much a valuable tool for guaranteeing your independence and for guaranteeing vigorous, aggressive journalism, which I very much propose. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. De Jong. If I may, a question or two.
Yes, sure.
You talked about the pressure from the owners, and you mentioned to have more clicks. Is the pressure only on the economic side of the issue, more selling, more clicks, or even in terms of the policy that the journalists follow?
No, it's strictly, I think it's strictly economically, because in fact, the owners of Nrc Media are very much journalistically engaged. They also have newspapers in Belgium. So they are a journalistic business. They are into the business of journalism. They're not investors or flash capital guys, which we have some very bad experiences in the past. The current owners are journalistically engaged, but they still, of course, they want to expand the readership. They want more readers. They want more subscriptions. I didn't note it in my introduction, but Nrc Media lives by subscriptions. We hardly live by sales on the streets or other ways of selling the product. So owners are interested in more subscriptions, and the danger the risk that might pose is not that they want to squeeze the newspaper for more revenue like investors would, but the risk is that they will tend to look what will the readership want and cater to the wishes of the readership, which might also be a threat to independence.
Mr. De Jong, in Albania we have a proverb, I mean, who guards the guard? And question is, who guards your job?
Who guards my job? Only God. The point is, an ombudsman is, just to clarify my position, I'm operating next to the editors-in-chief, but independent from them. So the opinions that I give for instance, in my weekly column are my own. They do not represent the opinion of the newspaper. And the newspaper might say, okay, that's a good opinion, we will work on it. They might also say, well, that's BS. We'll just, that's your opinion and never mind. And who guards me? Well, the editor-in-chief can fire me. If he doesn't like the work I'm doing, that's it.
Mr. De Jong, thank you so much. Very lucky to have you in our conference. And as Mr. De Jong mentioned, the pressure in countries like Netherlands comes from the economic aspect. And in Albania, we have journalists who don't work under that pressure because they don't work for Albania owners. And there are some journalists in Albania who are like legends that you hear often about them, but you rarely see. And we are lucky to have tonight here Besart Likmetaj, who with a very small group of young reporters do an excellent job in investigative journalism, which is not something that traditional media is keen for, a list of reasons to deal with. Besart, how relieved do you feel that you don't have that pressure from owners and you just follow what you really want to investigate?
Well,
To answer the question shortly, I think that we have more pressure than anybody else, because I think being an investigative journalist and working with investigative journalists, the standards that people aspire from your reporting are quite high, and the readers' expectations are quite high. And to be honest, also for us, we do have some sort of an owner. I mean, the donors, they're going to fund our next projects, certainly have expectations that we're going to, let's say, advance good governance, fight corruption. So there is no things in this world without string attached. I just want to go back a little bit in the discussion, in the framework about the independence of the media, and particularly digital media. And since the platform of this conference was regulated to see how do we move through self-regulation to more ethical media, I just want to open a little bit the discussion and have an understanding and shared agreement of what digital media is. I mean, when you think about digital media, we're talking about legacy media, which now are digital, newspapers, TV stations. They transmit in 0 and 1s mostly over the internet, although they're former broadcasters and printers. We have non-native digital media. We have the New York Times, the CNNs, the Russia Today, or I don't know, Anadolu, or the Chinese broadcasters. We have native digital media. We have, like in Albania, very popular line, I'll say Lapsi, Surid.net, but I should mention also others who do important work and captivate audiences. And also we have the social networks, which the Ombudsman mentioned. What do we call them? I do usually associate them as the biggest media in the country, in every country, because they are the deciding what kind of information the people are getting, the Googles and the Facebooks of this world. So this should be an important part of the discussion. When we talk about the route to self-regulation, ethics, and independence, we should actually ask ourselves, is it digital media in Albania regulated? Because there's been a lot of discussion in the last 2 years about regulation, about this like Wild West digital outlets, native digital outlets, being hundreds of them, that there is no regulation, and there is no, let's say, law that regulates them, so they can be wild, and they can be guns for hire, and they can slander and everything else. This is utterly untrue. I mean, speech, the main business of journalists, is heavily regulated. And there is a regulations about privacy. We have a data protection commissioner, and we have other institutions who regulate our work every day. So when you think about regulation, it's not that it doesn't exist. The kind of regulation we have is not the kind of regulation which is strictly controlled by the government. Although it influences, it's not strictly controlled by the government. What the government asked in the last 2 years, in one more layer of regulation, they would control directly. And we know that there's been a lot of debate about it. But what is clear is that what the conclusion of the Council of Europe, let's say, and many other agents that normally disagree about many other things, especially about media, agreed that this was going to push journalists to more self-censorship, and this was a threat to media freedom in Albania, was going to have, as the Venice Commission put it, a chilling effect on media freedom. So if the commissioner, the competition authority, all these institutions regulating media, why would you need another layer be put on the weak shoulders of journalists to carry on this burden that why defending public interests every day, and we know all the weaknesses of the local media structures in Albania, they should face one more layer of control, which, let's face it, as the Venice Commission said, was neither independent nor professional. That said, we should accept that the media faces a lot of challenges. Despite the regulation in Albania, it has a lot of problems. I mean, we have problems with fake news. We have problems, I'm talking about digital media, disinformation, misinformation, propaganda. You have guns for a hire. You have all kinds of problems. But the question we should be answering and asking ourselves, is the route to more regulation going to fix this, or is self-regulation going to fix this? I mean, is this a magic bullet? We know that more regulation by the government on top of what already is, I don't think is going to be effective. That's my opinion, but the opinion of many others who deal with media. And the risk of it, it's much higher regulation that this, let's say, conference, in a sense, is by the title is instigating. We should understand what we mean by self-regulation, because there is two types of it, and sometimes one is ignored and the other is mentioned. There is internal self-regulation, there is external self-regulation. Because when we discussed in the last 2 years with the government and the international interlocutors, they'll say, yeah, but the self-regulation has not been effective in Albania, or the self-regulation doesn't exist. It's not true when you think about it. There is no media without self-regulation. There is no media without editors. There is no media without some sort of written or unwritten editorial guidelines. I mean, you said, the Ombudsman said it very well. There is no written editorial guidelines in the Netherlands. Doesn't mean that the media there is not working, discussing about debating ethical issues. In Albania, we have for more than a decade editorial guidelines, but we're still facing a lot of problems, still discussing. We're going to continue to discuss for a long time about ethical issues, because in a complicated world, there is certain ethical dilemmas that we must answer when we do our job, when we take decisions every day, what to cover, how to cover it, what to report, what pictures to put on the front page. These are certain issues that arise and create ethical dilemmas. The problem with not addressing, I believe, internal self-regulation, it was because we're losing sight about the real weakness of the Albanian media. The Albanian media has not been facing all these problems with fake news, disinformation, propaganda, being guns for hire, because it lacked the external self-regulation. It wasn't the need for media owners to get together and to agree to structure outside themselves, to tell them that maybe you were doing some things wrong and to apologize sometimes, which I think it's a good idea also to have. But is the weakness of editorial structures. I mean, inside the media outlets in Albania, editors, the few that they are either don't have capacities to look at what the copies they're getting, or they don't have the time. There is very few of them. They're professionally weak, and they cannot control all the output that is expected of them. So this is an issue about the weakness of the structures of the media and the professionalism of the media. That's internal regulation. Journalists should, why are journalists trained? Why do journalists go to school? Why journalists are pushed through lifelong learning? Because that's regulation. You teach them how to be, choose the public interest over private interest. You may have editorial guidelines like in certain media outlets, and let's discuss it. In Albania, very few media have it written. That's not necessary to have them. Some have it. It's good. I think it gets more transparency, but it's not having something on paper that makes you more, let's say, independent or ethical. It's how you behave in the market, how you behave as an institution, what capacities you have to deal with these ethical dilemmas that basically you're looking for to answer. So we're discussing about the pandemic and how the fake news is spreading, and I tried to write about it, and so that a lot of disinformation went through the Albanian media and continues about COVID-19, and most of this stuff was just translated from propagandists, people who were spreading conspiracy theories in the world. And then it dawns on you, this external self-regulation going to fix it? No, because they can just say after 1 month that, oh, this was wrong, maybe apologize. But the amount of information that was getting through in a critical time, you don't control it without some sort of professional gatekeepers who are there to fact check the information. If you don't have editorial structures, if you have no investment in professional journalism, how's that your expectation you're going to do this with external self-regulation or with worst government regulation? So I think what my proposal would be, but this is food for thought, I think media should have more clear editorial guidelines, invest some time into writing them, maybe just having them part of the discussion with the journalistic community would be important. strengthen editorial capacities. I remember when I started work, and I know most international media, I have layers and layers of editor. They're not there for censorship. They're there to actually protect themselves from falsehood and protect the public from falsehood, who can be very dangerous. And we know from this time that some types of falsehood can even lead to coups, people storming what was unfathomable. I mean, Capitol Hill, the cradle of US democracy. And so that you have people there with all the, the untruths piled in their minds, just running against their, their country's democratic center. And we need, I think, also a lot of journalistic training. I know this is cliche, but not just the stuff that us NGOs do. I know that this is maybe the only venue that has been possible right now, but I think we need journalistic training inside the newsrooms. And the way to do it is not that there isn't opportunities, there is a lot of donors interested. I think it's the lack of interest from the media owners, which they think that they can, slave labor the journalists a little bit more, but not give them time to become more professionals, because I think they see professionalism as a threat to sometimes disinformation and propaganda and agendas they want to push. So they don't want trained journalists. They're very well happy with trained journalists, but I think it's in our public interest to have trained journalists in newsroom. And I think that newsrooms should also invest a little bit more in fact checking. I know it's difficult, the economic, structures behind the media scene where the market is controlled. And I think some of the things that were mentioned are really true about the digitalization process, how it was affected, and how but how also new opportunities have arisen with the digital native media, and how the government is in panic that they cannot control everything. You cannot have professional media information which is in public interest without proper editorial structures, without space where journalists can work freely, without journalistic training, so journalists can learn new techniques how to get to the truth. I mean, this is a continuously evolving world. And I think without controlling the facts, that can be quite impossible. Having an institution, I think I agree completely, and I think it's a great thing that the Ethics Media Alliance was pushed and created. But just saying after 1 month that one story was wrong or 2 stories were wrong, it's not, let's be honest, it's not going to solve the problems of the media. And we should think of, we don't need to kind of reinvent the wheel. We know that what the basic, let's say, structure of professional journalism, when they exist, are. Let's look at the most professional medias in the world, the medias who have existed for 100 years. How did they build their reputation? How do they do, let's say, reporting in the public interest? So the reporting of in public interest requires investment in human resources, requires investment in certain transparency toward the audiences, and we not going to achieve this by, let's say, even just short-term solutions about, get together, finger somebody that you're unprofessional, you made a mistake. But if that journalist is not trained, if that journalist didn't have proper editorial support, how can, let's say, an outside counsel say you're wrong because you pushed misinformation, now you apologize, or you're not the proper professional, when he never had an opportunity or the proper enabling environment to be a proper professional. So I hope this was something that puts a little bit food for thought about the discussions that we're going to have in the next 2 days, I think, or tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, Besar. It's very interesting because now we are living in a new area and discussing about the challenges that the media and the journalists face. We don't have the luxury to discuss in terms of we, the media, and the public, and the power, because now we live in the era of deinstitutionalization. We have politicians becoming media themselves. We have oligarchs or business leaders becoming media themselves. We have celebrities becoming media themselves. We have bloggers becoming the media. We have influencers. We have citizen journalists, and then we have the journalist. So the role of journalists now in this completely new environment, unthinkable 5 or 10 years ago, puts a lot of pressure on traditional media and unprofessional. And there is a clear correlation between professionalism and ethics. I mean, if you are a professional, you don't have to be mentioned about the ethics. And ethics in Albania, yes, we had the first code of ethics in the region in 1996, and then the second one in 2006, and then the other one in 2016. And the question is why they didn't work. Ethics is related with level of competition, tradition, and level of salary or the economic situation of the media. But when you face a media market which does not function according to the market rules, the question is how to get there, where to start in terms of creating the pools of integrity. And I'd like to invite to that discussion Elira Changa, who used to be a reporter and then expert on the media working for OSCE here, and luckily who have a healthy distance from day-to-day journalism, and probably will give us some thoughts on the big questions on self-regulations and ethics, why we are in a position that we are just starting yet, or restarting it.
Thank you, Luti, and thanks for having me here in this conference. Very high expectations. I might not have the answers for that, but I'll put my experience as a journalist and as a media developer into that, which is really my love and my profession. While it is such a pleasure to be here today with distinguished colleagues and friends, it is not easy to talk about new challenges we are facing now, digital media in the new era and main challenges, self-regulation, ethics, and independence. Well, this is really what we want from media, actually, from this healthy distance. But sometimes we forget that us as journalists, as media developers, as practitioners, we should be the ones to contribute to that first of all. I've been a journalist, as you mentioned, for 11 years before going into media development. And I can say that being a journalist in Albania has been a challenge from many perspectives. Work conditions, work security, salaries being paid in delay or not being paid at all, pressure from politics or business, and so on. I can mention dozens of these reasons or challenges we faced in this profession. On the other side, as Adi rightly mentioned, basic principles of this profession are still the same since the day one. They have not changed a bit. And these are independence, impartiality, verification of facts, public interest, verification of sources. Yet nowadays, challenges have been just multiplied because digital era has come with a great technological advancement. This is an advantage, actually, and has completely changed the way the public is informed and the way the public is engaged in informing the others. So it's spreading the information furthermore. This makes everybody from the public a bit of a reporter, and then yet, not any of them a real journalist. And the real journalist should monitor, have doubts, verify, fact check, get all sides of the story, and more than everything, be driven by the public interest. This is lecture number 1 in journalism. We have all been through it. Professional ethics is one of the most valuable features of this profession, and yet we see it in decline. Fake news is the newest challenge to media freedom. It undermines news credibility and creates different layers of scrutiny. This poses an additional pressure to journalists' work, their everyday work. The only possible answer to it is fact-based reporting, verification, and a clear distinction between what's a news, what is a report, what is an opinion, and what is a comment. If this distinction is lost, then trust in media decreases clearly. Then way to self-regulation. This has not been easy ever. In the last 3 decades, we have seen various efforts to create self-regulation mechanisms, and not all of them have been successful. We have been witnesses of this. Why? Because it has to come from within and not to be imposed from outside, as we people of projects like to do sometimes, or not like to do, but try to find a way to do sometimes. Having effective and credible self-regulation mechanism is the best barrier, I think, against excessive intervention from authorities, from the state. I think this is the only answer to it. Journalists should reflect and bring to the table their solutions to these ethical issues. And what's needed here is a polycentric approach. It cannot be done only from one mechanism. It has to come from all of us, and it has to engage all of us in a way. Here, I do need to congratulate the Albanian Media Council, which I have seen growing up, establishing a few years ago, and then growing up, and has been very active in tackling cases of violation of media ethics, bringing these issues to discussion and paving the way towards self-regulation as the alternative, as we have said, to state regulation, which no one of us wants. Very keen and interested on having an open discussion on media challenges. The organization which I represent, the OIC presence in Albania, has established a few years ago the Media Partners Group. This is a platform to discuss, to share opinions and thoughts, create synergies, to detect, to identify problems, and see how we can work together, all of us, to find solutions. It also organizes each year the Media Development Forum, which is kind of a mirror at the end of the year where we can see ourselves what we have been doing, actually, because we are working on projects, doing trainings, doing every kind of activity, but then what's the result? What's the impact of this? We have to think about that. Might not be enough, but we're willing to do more and ready to cooperate with partners and join forces in facing the additional challenges. With EU funding and OIC and EBU expertise also, we are working closely with the public broadcaster to ensure public service media is preserving its unique role in all this situation, and with the School of Journalism to make sure new generations have a hands-on approach in practicing journalism. So it's not just theory. I would like to praise actually the Albanian Helsinki Committee for this initiative to organize this conference, because this is really the platform of discussion which we really want to, to check what we are doing, to see what are the main problems and to discuss how can, overcome that. Professional dialogue is indispensable in finding solutions to new media realities and challenges. And actually, OIC is really supporting every joint effort in improving the role of media and asserting its position in Albanian democracy. So we are working in all fronts, but it's not enough, I think. And here I think we need we can join forces into that. I'll cut it short here and I can intervene then furthermore. But what I see as a must now is really cooperation between different regulators, donors, international organizations, and media itself.
Thank you, dear. It's not so easy. It seems to go back to the basics. And you mentioned that probably the most interesting thing is the long-term approach, working with schools and PBS, and something that these initiatives should come from within. I think I owe deep apologize for the participants online, because it seems that I'm a little bit abusing and talking among themselves. I'm not sure if I can see from here Erkanda Buyari from Council of Europe present. Oh yeah, I can see Erkanda. Erkanda, as we are not quite lucky to have time, but I just want your short opinion. The Council of Europe has been engaged on and off for decades now in terms of ethics and self-regulation. What is the biggest lessons that the Council of Europe here in Tirana has in regard to the self-regulation of the media in Albania?
Can everybody hear me?
Crystal clear.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lutfi. I'll be talking here a little bit, about how Council of Europe is trying to support self-regulation. As you know, I'm not an expert in self-regulation, so I don't take it upon myself to actually, and Council of Europe doesn't have an opinion. We have been trying to move self-regulation to the standards, best European standards, in terms of not just self-regulation, but what we call co-regulation. So we're working, in terms of audiovisual media with AMA, the Albanian Audiovisual Media Authority, and with the Albanian Media Council when it comes to self-regulation. I don't need to tell you that it's been such a struggle, and Elira also mentioned, to push a self-regulating mechanism in Albania forward. Albanian Media Council was the latest, the last one, the newest in the region to be set up. However, thanks to a group of very enthusiastic, journalists and media actors, they have been trying to have a viable instrument when it comes to self-regulation. Our project has been supporting Albanian Media Council for the past 5 years through grant schemes, expertise, exchanges with regional or European press councils in terms of sharing experiences, best practices of how they can set themselves up. Coloreto Tsukali, who is the director of the organization, is invited to talk tomorrow, so I'll leave it to him to talk more at length. But I want to emphasize their latest initiative, which is creating the Alliance for Ethical Media. 16 media entities, mostly online, got together and established this initiative. And right now, the latest count I have for these alliances is 23 media, which is great as a start. And I hope more online media join it for the purpose of actively engaging this media in abiding by the
22 out of 600, it's not a bad start.
Well, we can argue about that if all of those 600s are actual media, like a chef or some other ones, Bruley Broadway. Some people think they're media, but I would argue with that. So they established also the Board of Ethics, distinguished journalists, media law professionals, and other media actors are part of this board of ethics, and they receive complaints from the public, and they have already issued some decisions on these cases. Their Bible is the Code of Ethics, the Journalistic Code of Ethics of Albania.
Erkanda, just a question here, and I just want to summarize. Do you think that this embryonic development is going to get roots in the Albanian media, or is just another failed experiment?
I mean, we've been supporting them for quite some time, and we are witnessing their growth. I have to say that it hasn't been easy for them, but compared to 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we have made a big leap. Albanian Media Council was one of the, the organizers of these civil society and media organizations criticism of what, many people here mentioned, the Anti-Defamation Package. They have engaged so many media, 23 media who actually have the Alliance for Ethical Media logo in their site. They abide by these principles. And one other aspect that I want to emphasize is that in March 2018, we actually added to the Albanian Code of Ethics, ethical guidelines for online media. As Remzilani, your good friend and ours will tell you, Albania already had a very good code of ethics. However, we recognize the challenges that the digital media presented when it comes to self-regulation and abiding by a code of ethics. So this need was reflected into the initiative of the Albanian Media Institute in revising this code of ethics. So at this point, we can say that this self-regulation mechanism, presented by the Alliance for Ethical Media, does have the tools they need to actually, have a viable instrument in self-regulation in Albania. Is there a general support by all the media? There isn't, but this is where their word comes in. They were set up last September, so they're very new. If they get the support of all the media organizations in Albania who are really serious about the code of ethics, I think their work will, will continue. Personally, I'm very enthusiastic that this effort is succeeding. We can actually say it is succeeding. And I can tell you that at least one case, one decision from the Alliance, the Board of Ethics of the Alliance, was taken into consideration in the local courts. And that is already an achievement. You know that in Kosovo, for example, it's kind of mandatory that courts also take into consideration the press council's decisions of complaints.
Erkanda, thank you so much. I have to stop at this point because we are running out of time. And I'd like to invite Tamara Skroca, journalist and media expert from Serbia. Is Tamara present online?
Yes, I am.
Great, Tamara. I can hear you. I can see you now.
Hello.
My question is, we were talking mainly this 1 hour and a half about the media situation in Albania, but does it sound to you that we were talking about the also media situation in Serbia?
Well, all over the region, the problems are more or less the same. More or less general picture is more or less the same in all of the countries of the region. We all know that, because in all of the media conferences, we share similar experiences. However, I do think that Serbia is, well, exotic in some kind of ways, since we have some issues that are not as visible in other countries, in my opinion. Since we are running out of time, I'll be very short. First of all, when speaking about self-regulation, I have to say that we in Serbia have a press council for 10 years now. I'm actually member of Press Complaints Commission of Press Council in Serbia from the very beginning. And we don't face the same issue, the same problems as my esteemed colleagues mentioned before. Since we have formed that self-regulatory body, we have done everything we could to make it alive. We had many obstacles, many problems, many issues, very serious issues, not as serious issues, etc., etc. I don't want to bother you with that. We will have enough time tomorrow. But at this particular moment, and it lasts for a year now, I think, the press council is under a very profound kind of pressure from political forces, political parties. We actually receive a large number of politically influenced complaints. And however we decide as a Press Complaints Commission, we are guilty. We are declared as either opposition or close to the government. So we actually, in this particular moment, I really don't know what's the solution. I'm very pessimistic when it comes to press council. And I mentioned you that we had a large number of different issues during these last 10 years. So we are facing obstacles which are not, in my opinion, in common with the Albanian issues and the issues faced in other countries of the region. Furthermore, what's also very new in Serbia, my colleagues know that for years now, journalists and media in Serbia are under a very strong economical, political, and safety pressure. All kinds of pressures are present here. I don't want to bother you with that. But during the pandemic, the things that used to be bad turned tragical, actually. For example, we are facing a totally new kinds of pressures now. For example, we have a situation which is totally exotic. I've never heard of such a situation anywhere in the world, that individual journalists from pro-governmental media publicly at press conferences verbally attack their colleagues from independent media. And in my opinion, I think that the things are at the verge of physical clashes. So I've never heard of such a thing, and it's an everyday issue here in Serbia. And the last thing I wanted to point out, and the last thing I wanted to somehow turn your attention to, is a very serious issue of a new political pressure we are facing these days. Earlier on, we had pressures from tabloids. We had pressures from the president himself and his advisors in person. But nowadays, and each and every day, even today, we have verbal attacks on journalists and media in National Assembly. So our MPs are using their power to attack individual journalists each and every day. Especially interesting is the case of investigative journalists at this particular moment. The journalists from world-known investigative portal Creek, and they are seriously attacked not only by the president, not only by the tabloids, but by practically all the MPs in the National Assembly, since we have a very unified assembly consisting of members or 2 or 3 parties, actually. So
Tamara.
these are some exotic issues I want to turn your attention to. But general picture is more or less the same in the region.
Tamara, thank you so much. I mean, press council having enemies on both sides means real independence, at least in the region. And it's very regretful that we see attacks on journalists, and very shameful when journalists attacks journalists. Deep apologize for participants online. We might have slightly a technical problem, which will be resolved in a minute or two, and you will have a new link for joining us, at least for 10-15 minutes that we have to discuss. So we'll continue a little bit here in the room in Tirana, the discussion, and I hope that you'll join us very soon. Kreshnik Gash is here from Kosovo. Kreshnik, I was just wondering, for years, not to say decades now, the whole world was talking about the climate change. Tons of conferences, seminars, workshops, publications, and then suddenly a virus appeared and the problem became more clear and the solution also a little bit more clear. Do you see any virus around which might enlighten us and help us not only to talk about the self-regulation, but also to have it implemented in the media?
Hi, everyone. For people who don't know me, I'm Kreshnik Gash. I'm the managing editor of Beer Kosovo's products, and I'm also law graduated, so I'm a lawyer by profession, but I am an editor today. And also I'm a member of the Press Council of Kosovo. So I'm trying to find out the solution, how to make journalists more ethics-based and more professional today. One of the first things that I'm telling to the young journalists in my team, but also in the cases when I am making trainings and things like that, I'm telling them that if you are going to write an article, please take care about this, and this. Because today in Kosovo media, we don't have editors. We don't have people who are looking on the articles, on the materials that are being published, and we don't have the control on what is being published. In Kosovo, we have more than 100 online medias, and we have like 10 or 15 people working on them, but they don't have the chance to have editors, letters, and things like that. So I see a big risk on them, and this is a big problem. When we don't have editors, what are we are talking? For self-regulation? No, because the first step, we are not using it. as a person who I'm trying to find solutions and things like that. In the Kosovo situation, we need to know that one of the biggest finances for the media is the government. A lot of money from the government are being delivered to the media. A lot of money of public enterprises are being delivered to the media. So if you are looking to the incomes for the media, you will find out that 50%, 60% of their incomes are generated by state institutions.
The only good thing seems that the government changed a little bit often in Kosovo.
Yeah.
Every year and a half.
And as press council, what we were asking to the government was just to put a standard. Do not give money to media who are producing fake news and disinformation. The reason why was that last year we did an investigation that shows us that there were hundreds of online media getting funds from government and public enterprises. And we are 30 media members of the press council. 70 of them, they were not respecting the code of ethics. They were not using the ethic code and things like that, but they were generating money from the government. And what was the reason? Produce a lot of fake news to change the climate in Kosovo and to put a new law that sends online media in one regulative body, which is controlled by the government. This is the reason why they are financing the fake news, why they are financing this disinformation producers, just to create the climate in the country that the media should be controlled by one state mechanism. And what we find out there were a lot of initiatives in our parliament. There were a lot of says that media is producing a lot of fake news and things like that. But when we find out and going back and starting analyzing it, the investigative media, the credible media, they were not producing fake news. But this media that were getting a lot of funds from the government, they were receiving a lot of funds. The consequences, or what was the result of after we published this investigation? You know that writing articles in which you are reporting that your colleagues are misusing the profession is very dangerous. It's more dangerous than if you are writing something for an organized crime group or for a politician, because they have the arms to attack you. When we start publishing this investigation, they were writing to us and saying, we will write against you. And it was us against hundreds of portals that were getting this money in illegal ways, but they started writing against us. They named us people who are connected with Serbia, people who are connected with this political party and that political party. So we had been attacked from the fake news and from the propaganda. And the result was not very well.
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, here in Balkans, we have that story that the dogs barks to the foreigners, but never barks to those who feed him. And the challenge is how to make sure that the dog will still be barking to everyone. I'm told that we don't have any more the technical problem. I'd like to jump to Montenegro. Is Milka Tadic online? So I have
I am online. Yes, do you hear me?
Great, Milka. Great to have you. What's the situation like in Montenegro in terms of journalists and self-regulation? And if we can make a triangle, is the government making the same efforts and pressure like Krešnik mentioned the case of Kosovo?
Unfortunately, in Montenegro, situation is similar as in Kosovo and in Serbia. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about these topics in this challenging time. Montenegro has a lot of problems regarding freedom of media and expression. On the Reporters Without Borders Freedom Index, we are unfortunately on the bottom in Europe due physical attacks on journalists, and most of those attacks are unsolved, financial pressure on media, especially those media who are not pro-government, and verbal attack and pressure from those in power and business. So when we are talking about self-regulation self-regulation is an issue in Montenegro. Montenegro does not have an effective self-regulatory body, unfortunately. The Council for Media Self-Regulation, which was registered after the breakup of the single self-regulatory body in 2012, served more as a critic of those media who were not close to the ruling DPS structures. This self-regulatory body is not, unfortunately, they do not have a same criteria for everyone. Due to the lack of effective and unified self-regulatory body, some professional media in Montenegro, they have their own ombudsmans, and they are trying to have an effective self-regulation through the independent ombudsman. But we are talking about digital media, and since we are talking about digital media, I would like to have a small discussion, because I know that we are running out of time, but unfortunately in Montenegro, digital media are very often platforms for non-transparent political battles, tool to beat opponent and critics. The law stipulates that all media outlets have to identify the founders, owners, and editors. Traditional media mostly obey this law, but numerous digital media don't. So what we have actually in what situation we have in our country is that there are websites and portals for which it is not known who are the founders, editors, and journalists, where the headquarters are, and as well, it's also unknown who financed them and from where money is coming. Such a media usually operates before, and they are very active before elections, and serve to blacken the opponents of those in power. So through this media, we have, they are spreading fake news. For example, before last name Udar, they appeared out of the blue, and they were active only before the elections. And they have been connecting journalists and opposition representatives with the foreign secret services. A regulatory agency in Montenegro could not answer who was behind this portal. And as I said, after the elections, they just disappeared. So unfortunately, the fake news and hate speech is an issue here, and those digital media which are actually functioning, not following the law, are becoming a real problem in Montenegro.
Milka, thank you so much. You mentioned a very important problem, the question of anonymity on the digital media, and that reminds us of a famous song of the group Modern Talking: no face, no name, no number.
Yes.
The same situation, unfortunately, is with huge part of the online media. We have two more presentation, short presentations. And Milka, I have to say that although we didn't see your face on the presentation, it was like hearing a very nice podcast. Elvira Jukic from Sarajevo, I think.
Hi.
Hi, Elvira.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for the patience.
No problem. Yeah, so I can recognize whatever everyone was speaking from their countries. I can recognize the similar problems that we're facing here also in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And since we don't have much time, I'll just directly jump to the issue of self-regulation that we're talking here in the past few minutes. And somebody mentioned press council. There is press council in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but it works. In principle, it works good in terms of citizens or anyone. You can report to press council for any kind of regulation, breach of regulation in terms of media, online press and online media. And they have just as Tamara described from Serbia, they have a council that decides whether there was a breach or not. And I believe that it's just part of the topic of self-regulation. So it's just acting upon whoever reports a breach of regulation or breach of ethics, to be more precise. But another part that I want to point out from Bosnia and Herzegovina is I know that now in all of these countries from Western Balkans, there are debunking platforms or fact-checking platforms. So one of them is Raskrinkavanje from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they're working proactively, or they're doing on their own. They're fishing for examples of breach of ethics, or they're kind of fishing for examples of disinformation. And then they are debunking Western Balkan countries and also globally. And I have to point out that their work has been criticized a lot by the media, by even mainstream media, online media, because they're spotting disinformation and fake news, and they're fact-checking also newspapers, their online editions. And it's not really popular among working journalists, even professional journalists, when you see that your work is sized and fact-checked by this platform, and they're accusing them of being professional journalists and whatnot. And what we are doing in Media Center Sarajevo is also observing and
Elvira, I think we have a connection problem.
Do you hear me?
Yes, now.
I'm sorry if it's up to my connection, but anyway, I just want to point out that we have to be more open, every one of us. We have to be more open to criticism from our colleagues. We have to be kind of ready to promote this culture of criticizing even the professional part of the best part of journalism in our country, in our societies. And I think that by promoting this culture of receiving criticism and being constructive about each one of each other's work, I think that we're going to be a step closer to reaching more qualitative journalism. And this is what people will also recognize. I guess we'll be talking much more about self-regulation and all these very important topics tomorrow, but I just wanted to point out these few things that a lot has been said in the past hour and a half, so I'm not going to repeat a lot of the things, but I just want to also point out the thing about ethics, since this part is about ethics, is that most often I see my colleagues that most of the newsrooms, they think they know everything about ethics because they read the ethics code, and they think that on a daily basis they know everything. But what we're doing mostly in Media Center Sarajevo, we are analyzing the work of other media in terms of whether they are doing a professional work or ethical work. And every day you can see so many different breaches of ethics, even by the good pupils. So this is just a short overview of the topic from my side. I hope we'll have more time to discuss all these matters tomorrow.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you very much, Elvira. You mentioned very important issue, not the question only on self-regulation ethics, but also of solidarity. And we'd use in Albania an expression, flowers don't touch. We journalists are a little bit selfish and arrogant in terms that we don't like our work being scrutinized, let alone criticized. I don't know, I'm not sure if there is this situation in Northern Macedonia, because also there there is, I think, one very good website who does the fact checking. Is Vasco Popetrevski online?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening, everybody. Hello from Skopje. First of all, let me correct you. The new name of the country is North Macedonia, not Northern Macedonia. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So in general terms, the situation with the media and the freedom of speech in North Macedonia is better than it has been in the period of the government of Nikola Gruevski. As you may know, North Macedonia went through a dramatic period of decline of democracy. At that time, it was a period from 2006 to 2016. Most media at that time, both traditional and new media, were controlled by the then ruling party, VMRO DPMNE. So when I was listening to Ms. Tamara Skroza from Serbia, unfortunately, I think that Serbia is now living what we have lived through in this decade from 2006 until 2016. As I said, in general terms, the situation now I think is better. There are no government advertisements as a tool of control over the media, no wiretapping of journalists. I think that some of you are aware of this big scandal of wiretapping of more than 4,000 people in this period from 2006 until 2016, among them many journalists. Me personally, I've been wiretapped for 2,756 days, which is 7.5 years. So hopefully no wiretapping in this period. But does it mean that the situation is perfect? No, not at all. We have our Council of Media Ethics from 2014. It is very active. We have a very active also press complaints commission. There is some statistics, let's say, from the previous year, 140 results cases, 109 moral sanction imposed. If you are interested in the origin of the complaints, 127 were for online media. So as I said,
just to be sure, and just to let you know that this conference is also taped and recorded.
No problem for me. Thank you. There were also attempts even to engage with the business sector in 2019. The largest association of journalists in North Macedonia and the Council of Media Ethics, as I said, the self-regulatory body of the media in the country, started a project to create a register of professional online media. As part of the initiative, they signed a memorandum of cooperation with the largest chamber of commerce in the country. The aim was, as was stated, to make it easier for the business community to identify which media meet the criteria to be media, respect the code of ethics, and have transparent ownership and impressum. But if you ask about my opinion about the effects, its effect in practice, in my opinion, is zero. And just one illustration, I just visited the online portal of a self-proclaimed journalist whose posts, I will not name them news because they do not respect any professional or ethical standards. The portal, of course, is not part of the register of professional online media, but is flooded with ads. Many of them are from companies that are members of the largest Chamber of Commerce, which, as I have already said, signed a memorandum of cooperation with the Association of Journalists and the Council of Media Ethics. It turns out that the Chamber's commitment to encourage advertising only among the members of the registry was only rhetorical. And if you are interested in the reason, apart from presumptive blackmail and racketeering for such a large number of advertisements on this portal, I would say it is its closeness to the current ruling party of the Prime Minister Zoran Zaev and the open defense of its policies. So we have better but not perfect situation in North Macedonia.
Vasko Popetrevski, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm sorry to hear that this novel idea of journalist associations and portals who have a contract or an agreement with the business side is not working properly, or at least it's not working as it was initially thought. But I have to thank you for the contribution. Also, thank you, Elvira Jukic from Sarajevo, Milka Tadic from Montenegro, Tamara Skroca from Serbia, Erkana Bujari from Council of Europe, Edira Chanka from OSCE in Albania, Kreshnik Gashing from Kosovo, Besalik Meta, Birn Albania, Short de Jong, Ombudsman of NRC, thank you so much for your contribution. Thank you so much, Rida, and Madam Ambassador Gusia Korfal Altes, thank you so much for the contribution. I have to remind you that tomorrow at 10 o'clock we'll start sharp and we'll have a very, very interesting. I don't think we have time for discussion.
Maybe for me.
I'm suggested that we should have discussion, but I've just read the tweet before starting this conference that online presence shouldn't be by no means more than 90 minutes, and I think we exceeded that time. We'll have time for discussion tomorrow also, even for the very fact that self-regulation has a dedicated session tomorrow. There is an I think very interesting session also in the question of Article 8 of versus Article 9, privacy versus the right for freedom of expression. And I wish you a very good night, and see you tomorrow, see each other tomorrow, as a matter of fact, starting virtually by 8 o'clock a.m. Thank you so much.